Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, we're going to discuss how to stop tracking food. So if you're someone who's been tracking food for a long time, or you just want to take a break in general, we're going to give you very practical steps on how to do this, both from a mental health and physical and actionable steps. So if you are ready, listen up and lean in as we elevate your mind.
Yes.
This has been a topic of conversation recently with clients.
It's usually a topic of conversation with my long-term ones.
Yes. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like,
that sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to do it all the time. It should not be done forever. I do it. It just makes my life easier when I do it.
For me right now, I do it because I'm trying to make sure I eat enough and eat more.
Yes.
So because I thought about it the other week. I was like, I'm kind of over this and I really don't need to. And then I thought, if I don't, I will not be eating enough.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
I know.
For me, I can do it. Especially now that I kind of have my meals and everything. I like what I eat. So I just know that I have to keep up other things, which we'll talk about. But I want to talk about my therapy session, you guys.
Okay.
I talked to a man about this already. I had one of the most difficult therapy sessions of my life. I have never cried that hard. I cried so hard so I had therapy at 9 a.m. and I saw you at 6:30 p.m.
Yes.
And my eyes still hurt. They still felt dry. And what we were discussing is my inability, what looks like an inability to ask for help, but it is the inability to trust that people will help me, which is a secondary symptom of that. And we went through, I know all of this, but it was just so interesting, the connections that my mind made, my brain made about why this happens, and, learning to trust others. And, where it came from actually was a conversation with a client that I had, but also I went to my foundress meeting, which is like a female entrepreneur group that I'm a part of. And one of the gals was saying that this was the keynote speaker, that she was trying to learn acrobatic yoga. She wasn't trying to learn acrobatic yoga. She was trying to get certified in yoga, but acrobatic yoga was a part of the certification. And she's, on the bottom trying to hold these people up. She's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And the yoga instructor finally pulled her aside and said, the reason why you can't support others is you don't allow the support in. And I thought, that's me. Like, I can help others, obviously, but it just got me thinking about, why is it so hard for me to ask other people for help? And I mean, my best friend, like I will talk myself out of calling her if I need her. I'll talk myself out of calling you all the time, all the time. And it's oh, she's busy, or, oh, there's too much on their plate, or, oh, blah, 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 blah. And it just was, we connected to so many crazy things. It was nutsos. So I want everyone to know the work. I'm a therapist, by the way, if you didn't know that. The work is ongoing. And the way that my therapist explained it, she goes, well, you've done all this work in all these other areas. And now, what did she say? It's time for your, that inner child part of you to heal. Like, you had to get all these other areas taken care of. And now you can just heal this very wounded part of you. And it was so good. And I will say, I probably should have just slept all weekend after that. I didn't. But
how do you feel today, like 3 days later?
And still, I'm tired, but I talked to Mark about it, and we had a conversation about it. And I just, for like people listening, like I have to catch myself, my reactions when I'm in that space where we talk to you guys about catching reactions to your emotional eating, catching reactions to your feelings of less than in your body, catching reactions to your inner critic. My inner critic is a critic of everyone else, of you're not going to show up for me. You're not going to take care of me. So I'm just going to do it myself. So
Right.
I have to be aware. So this is a good lesson because we just had our inner critic episode of like, sometimes the critic's not even about you. It's about everyone else. Right. They're not going to show up for me. And that's very much we always talk about I talked about this about the argument with the guy I got in, the less than and better than-ness. It's not a better than for me though. It's, you're not going to show up for me. There is a difference of like, I'm making it about the other person, having some sort of inability that is going to affect me.
Right.
Rather than, and it's not I don't deserve the help. I don't believe that part. I just don't think you're going to do it. And or it's going to become about you. And now I told Mark this, and this is just the lesson I want to teach you guys. I said, any hint of you're not going to say yes, or you can do it, or it's somehow becomes about you, or I have to be put into a parent role, a coach role when I'm not in that role, right? When I'm trying to not be in that role, that's where that's when my retreat, like I turtle, go back in my shell. I got this, leave me alone. It's just so interesting.
Well, that's got to be hard because knowing you and what you're trying to do for the brand, right? At some, like the inner self is not meeting the overall goal of this part of your life, right?
Yeah.
Because you literally can't step away if you keep this up.
Right.
And it's not that you're going to like step away and be like, okay, I'm done with it. But like, I can't take more of like the executive role of overseeing coaches if I don't learn how to give this some leeway, right? It doesn't mean like I'm not doing it, but it just, if I don't do that, then what's the point of having us and the other coaches, right? If you're just going to keep taking everything on because we might not step up in the way that you think or whatever that is. And it's like not a knock on us per se, because you contract us and you respect us and you want us to thrive and do well and represent the business. But then there's that like little voice in your back of your head that's going like, yeah, but maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think at this point, with you have proven that you show up for me.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a good feeling. I mean, I think, and really it was when my dad got sick and I was like, oh, look at these people. They're just showing up and it's great. So it almost had to be this tragic thing for me to be able to.
But like, okay, we'll put it in the client's like perspective. It had to be the doctor going, you have to do something or this is not going to turn out well.
Right.
Right. And so, okay, maybe like, could they have recognized the signs of, ill health before? Yeah, but their body always worked. They were able to get through it. They were able to do that. And then something happened where they weren't able to anymore. And so, okay, I can recognize it. I can know it. It doesn't mean I'm going to completely change tomorrow and be like, okay, I'm good. But it's also kind of going, okay, so now what do I need to do slowly but surely where I'm comfortable with it, but I'm also kind of challenging myself consistently that I can build this like trust in this relationship and whatnot too. And that's also why you like have the intern program, right? That's also why you do the scholarships, because you're like, well, I don't, if the intern doesn't work out, then I don't necessarily want you as a coach. Like, I don't want to just hire the coach and then be like, wait, what the fuck is happening? And then clean up the mess. Right.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a big deal. And, eventually we will have people like the way I see it. And this work has to be done internally to allow for this to happen, where there's someone in charge of coaches. That's not me.
Yeah.
Right. I'm in charge of the business. And there's actually a university from Foundress. It's like this coaching program that they talk about going from founder to CEO and the difference between those two things. Yeah. So I think I'm going to do it. It's like a whole day thing though. I feel so bad because everything seems to be happening on Thursdays and I have a lot of clients on Thursdays that I'm needing to move. Like this is on a Thursday. Like I don't know, because I only see clients Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah,
Thursday.
but what are you gonna do? Like, not because that's putting you back in that, like,
Oh, I
reliant
know.
on self mindset, of like,
Right.
well, like, they can either do a loom or one of us can step in, or like they can change the day, or you can, like,
Mhm.
there's the
Things we
benefit
can
of
do.
online program is there's multiple opportunities of restructuring just one call.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. So I think I'm going to do that. There's another one. I was on Pinterest because I'm not going on social media
Naturally.
because I have the app
Right.
that doesn't allow me to. And
Right.
one of the pins that I pinned is the like podcast that changed my life.
Uh-huh.
Or I think it was like 10 of them. So I started listening to School of Greatness,
Mhm.
Diary of a CEO.
Mhm.
I think it's the mindful meditation or something like that. There's a whole list of them, but he was talking about his. They were talking about like the mentality that the rich don't tell other people, like the mentality of millionaires.
Yeah.
And long story short, they have a School of Greatness like workshop thing for 2 days, and the only the only thing is David Goggins is going to be there, and it's a little
Oh,
intense for me.
no.
But I want to hear everyone else. So I want to go to more of stuff like that too, where
Right.
I can learn from, other people who are in this space. And that's what they said. They said, ask, I wrote it down. Um, it said millionaire mindset, curiosity over IQ, and follow through over experience.
Yes.
So the more questions you ask, the more that you learn is better than what you know,
Right.
right? Meaning you could have a MBA from Harvard in business, but if you don't ask questions, and that's another thing too, is like, so this is a nice segue of I'll see clients who have done it their way or they've come from different types of programming and they want to do it that same way, but they're not seeing results. They're not understanding. They're not asking questions. They don't necessarily want to learn
Mhm.
either, right? I think when the clients want to learn why we're doing the things we're doing, obviously we try to explain that. They tend to do better, but yeah, we should do more of that stuff. We should do more of the like workshops and stuff.
Mhm. I
So
always get a
I feel like,
lot. So actually, it's funny you bring that up because I went to like a workshop on Saturday,
oh,
that a local public PT group was hosting at this gym that was actually by you.
hmm,
Um, so like I saw it on Instagram, so it was free, and I was like, oh, I'll go and sign up and whatnot, and figured like I can always learn something, right? And it
mm-hmm.
was like an hour in the morning, so it's kind
Oh,
of
that's
perfect.
nice.
Yeah. So I went and I was sitting there and they were talking and I was like, wow, I like know all this stuff. And not like being like, ugh, I know all this stuff. It was more so of like, wow, I already knew this information.
That's
But
great.
yeah, where you're like, it's really nice to like have a refresher on it. And it's really nice to
Yeah.
hear it from a different field and perspective. But it was also like reassuring of like, I've really learned a lot the last, 3-4 years of like talking to people and doing this and working on. I'm going to try and get my fan. There we go. And just kind of looking at my own stuff and then looking at this stuff and asking questions. And so that was nice.
Mm,
I was
yeah.
like, huh, okay. Not
It's
as,
been a week of we knew that, but we needed to work on
yeah,
that. We
yeah,
needed to
yeah.
remind ourselves of it,
Yes.
whether it's my therapy, the podcast, your stuff,
Yeah.
the foundress group. Like it is so interesting though, because this group is all women entrepreneurs and they ask questions like who here feels um who's excited about the last quarter of the year. So we all stood up.
Hmm.
Or yeah. Then she said, okay, stay standing if you are anxious about this last quarter. And I sat down.
Oh, you're not?
No,
Okay.
because we have everything other than the changes you and I are going to make.
Uh-huh.
Like
Set
we've
up.
got cohort,
Yep.
self-guided, one-to-one
Yep.
mindset and movement. Like
Yep.
it is set up. We have landing pages. We have automations. We have everything in place. I feel like we have a good set of coaches. You'd think right now I'd be freaking the fuck out because you're going on maternity leave. I am not. I know that now, having Liz on, and then Deathly will do the cohorts.
Huh?
We have Laura, who I have to talk. Oh no, my headphones are going to die. I got to talk about, I offered someone a scholarship to our program. So for those who are listening, I offer scholarships to people who are in need that reach out and they ask a lot of questions, and they, there's a lot to it. How I offer these scholarships. So it's not just one thing, it's many things. And I offered this to a woman who continued to ask questions. She was potentially going to get on a call with us, but she said she couldn't afford it, so on and so forth. And she told me that she's not going to do it because she's going to go on GLP-1
instead.
Yeah. But I feel like I don't have to freak out because I have people.
Yep.
And so that was really good. And unfortunately, a lot of people stood standing. And then she asked, do you feel like an imposter? And I was like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't feel like an imposter. You can't be an imposter when you fucking create the fucking scene. I was thinking about that. Like, I listened to this girl. I'm going to have to switch headphones here in a sec. I follow this girl who is a PhD, and she has a coaching program for coaches.
Oh yeah.
So I got on her email and watched some of her stuff. And she's very charismatic, smart girl. But I don't know how many client hours she has.
Other than the PhD part.
Yeah. So I did look up her research. She has researched, she's published a few times. So credibility is there. But at the end of the day yes, we can teach coaches how to be aware of self-sabotage and mindset struggles, but how much client contact do you have? It's different to be in a research setting than it is face-to-face in the trenches with people, So let's talk about something funny.
Okay.
Funny. Because I feel like we started this real heavy.
Funny?
Yeah.
I don't have.
You want to talk about Mike? You want to continue to tell everyone about Michael's amazing personal training experience? I cannot. I want to figure out who this person is and show up and be like, here's MAPS anabolic. You just start there, honey. Yeah. Just start there. You guys, this guy literally be like, what do you want to work on today? And then he'll go talk to other people in the gym.
And then he has him do different exercises each time. And then he makes Michael push the sled every couple workout or every couple exercises. It's just, I can't even, it's so disheartening. It's so hard because I want to just go. And I don't think I have it in me to just go and watch. I think I would lose my mind.
Yeah.
And so I don't go. But every time he comes home, I want to know how it was because I want to torture myself, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah.
So,
it's for those of you listening, these are the what not to do, who not to hire when it comes to a personal trainer.
Who to fire immediately.
Correct.
The fact that he hasn't fired him. I'm like, oh my God, why are you doing this to me? I'm taking this as
why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, I'm taking this as a personal attack. Because
she is a great example. She told her partner, she said, well, what if I just went and test drove a bunch of fast cars and then was like, oh yeah, I just listened to the guy and got the one that he said to get.
Yes.
He goes, that's a great example of exactly how you feel, you know? Luckily my husband lets me do his training.
Yeah.
Lucky. Anyway.
Lucky.
Yeah. He does this training. We are friends on MyFitnessPal, so he can see what I'm eating that evening, and then he makes it for dinner.
Oh, good.
So it's great. It's great, great, great. Speaking of MyFitnessPal, let's talk about stopping tracking. No more tracking. No more tracking. I interrupt this episode to bring you our biggest promo, which is $100 off the Mindset Method group coaching cohort. This cohort is designed to work in a group capacity and work together to understand your relationship with your body, food, and self-worth. More importantly, this is our last cohort in 2024, and you'll be able to work with my Mindset Method coaches on how to not put too much on your plate, both figuratively and literally during the holiday season. In this program, you receive access to the Mindset of Matter app, where you get access to our exclusive Mindset Method curriculum and reflections. On top of that, you receive daily journal prompts to help solidify what you're learning through that curriculum and that reflection of the week. And more importantly, you get time with a coach. You and your cohort will work with your Mindset Method coach to process and understand and get coaching around what you're learning. And that is on a weekly basis. On top of that, and last but not least, you'll get access to the community forum and so many other resources. So if you're ready to go through a holiday season where we do not binge, we don't see weight gain, we don't go into the mindset of starting again on January, check out the show notes below for the link to this offer. Now, back to the show. I personally have been tracking for 10 years, and that's just what I do because for me, it's simple.
Yeah.
I don't need to track because I literally eat the same shit. I remember in my head what each thing is. Plus, I can look at a meal and say, that's 4 ounces, that's 5 ounces. But it's interesting because it's been, like I had mentioned, such a topic of conversation with clients. I don't want to track forever. And so we thought we'd chat about that, but talk to the folks about what is tracking.
There are multiple ways to track, but today we're primarily going to focus on the calories and macro tracking. So like, for example, MyFitnessPal, Chronometer,
Macro Stack.
Yeah, as macro,
True Coach,
True Coach, and then Lane Norton
Trainer Ice
too. So there's tons of different ways. But anyways, it's basically a structured way to better understand nutrient intake and or to reach your goals. And the goals can be whether it's eating enough. So for example, me, I need to make sure I'm eating enough right now for pregnancy, because if I don't, I will feel like shit. But it's also like, I don't really want to eat anymore. But also to make sure we're eating enough for your lifestyle, aesthetics, or performance goals. So like, for example, we had Dr. Austin on, and he wants to make sure that his athletes are eating enough even before they're going into a cut for the MMA fighting. But different ways that we can track, like we talked about the calories and macronutrients. You can also track using hand portions, plate portions, or even food diaries. So just writing out, like, I had chicken with spinach and goat cheese, basically a salad, right? So, but most of the time when people are referring to tracking, it's this calories and macros that they're
the scale.
And so, and because you can also track via measurements, right? So like using cups and tablespoons and whatnot, but the fatigue that we often see is because of the scale tracking, and because of the putting it in an app and taking, because it does take extra time. Like, I'm not going to lie, but it's also, what are your goals and what's going on and what are we trying to achieve here? So there's pros and cons.
Yeah. No, I 100%, when I learned how to track food 10 years ago, it changed my physique completely. Like, completely. I thought I was eating healthy. I've talked about it on here. I'd go to like Sprouts instead of fries and like buy healthy food. And I'd like lose weight, but I never got like as lean as I've been in the past. And tracking did it. Now, I unfortunately was taught by someone who I would probably call disordered herself. And it was not a good look, because I didn't get into my nutrition certifications until late to like 2019, 18. I don't remember.
The point that you just said, though, is how you learn how to track might influence how you feel how you're tracking.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, if you had a shitty coach teach you, like, you have to do this, and didn't really say, like, do you want to do it this way? Because there's other options. Like, you might think you're almost like a slave to the tracking when really there's a lot of options. And again, or like, if you have a coach like us, where I'm like, if you don't want to track, like, let's not, but there are trade-offs, but let's just make sure you understand that. And then if you decide you want to track, maybe later on, great. But if you don't, great. If you like tracking and you don't mind it, that's fine with me too.
I will say that tracking is the most accurate way to
Yes.
understand your
Yeah.
intake. And people would need to understand that part. Like we have
Mhm.
a food journal, and I'll say, like, we can use this. I just need you to know that I'm not going to have an accurate understanding of what you're eating. I even use like AI to help with food journal estimations.
Yeah.
But again, it's estimating,
Well, that's
right?
assuming that they uploaded their pictures too, because sometimes my clients will
Right.
just list
I'm
out like
sorry.
clementine, protein pancake, peanut butter, and I'm like 5 protein pancakes or 1 protein pancake?
Yeah. What was this
3
cooked in? Did
tablespoons
you
of
have
peanut
butter?
butter? Yeah. So sometimes I'm using food journal or tracking as just like as a method to get them comfortable with giving that data too, right?
Yeah,
Instead of
for
living
sure.
in shame of tracking and not tracking, it's like, I want you to
Mhm.
just share what you're eating and let's just go from there.
Yeah. So I see tracking very much as an educational tool
Mhm.
for our clients because there are study after study that we like, what is it? 60% underestimate what we eat and 40% overestimate how much we've burned or vice versa.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. So long story short, we underestimate what we intake, what we're eating, and we overestimate how many calories we burn through movement.
Mhm.
So that is why people will be like, "No, I eat healthy, I work out," but they're not. There's no data to show that they're eating in a calorie deficit, right? So we'll touch on that in a second. When I can weigh my food, put it into a system like MyFitnessPal that then tells me how many calories that is, and I have a certain amount of calories to hit for maintenance, weight, fat loss, or surplus gaining, then that is going to help me get there more accurately
Mhm.
than anything else. And I always use the metaphor of a bank account, right?
Yep.
So I need to know how much money I'm putting in. I need to know how much money I'm taking out. I need to know what my balance needs to always be so that I don't, over like or withdraw, right? Go in the red. And that is true too with your food. So just as a recap, we have three different ways of calculating calories. We have a calorie deficit,
Mhm.
and a calorie deficit is eating less than what your body needs in regards to the energy that it burns each day. So that energy is not just through exercise, it's through three other means that um, two of them. So exercise and non-exercise activity is movement. The thermic effect of food is digestion, and then your non-exercise, I'm sorry, your resting metabolism or your BMR is everything you burn without moving.
Yep.
Okay. So then we have a maintenance, meaning, so calorie deficit is how you would burn fat, right? And lose weight. Now, a traditional calorie deficit could be anywhere from zero point 0.5 to 1 pounds of weight loss per week, depending on your food intake. We have maintenance, which is not gaining, not losing. We're just kind of staying at our current weight range. That doesn't necessarily mean you won't see changes, but you are just kind of eating around the same. And then a surplus would be where we want to build. So we've talked about this before. When you see like influencers who focus on like building butts, a lot of those girls are going into a surplus because we require more intake to build a butt. So no matter what phase you're in, tracking is important as an educational piece.
Mhm.
I think people think tracking only deficit, but I have seen that looseness in a reverse and fat loss increase very quickly. I try to explain to people like your tracking in your reverse and your surplus is just as important, if not more important,
Yeah.
than your tracking in your
Well,
deficit.
and I was thinking of a particular client that I'm working with currently. It's interesting of she was like, "Yeah, I'll track," but there was some history of disordered eating. But
Mhm.
what it made her realize was, "I'm actually not eating as much as I thought I was." Too.
Mhm.
So there is a
Yeah.
flip side of, like, the shame of, like, if I put it down in a, like, structured way, I'm gonna see how much I do eat, and this is the cause of my weight gain. But there's also the shame of, like, realizing, like, "Okay, so I am looking and feeling this way, and I'm not even eating that much." Like, wow, I thought I was totally over-consuming. So,
Yep.
again, some benefits to the educational piece that we're talking about here. Um, but also, at some point, like we said, you might wanna stop. You might be over it. You might be like, "I
Yeah.
reached my goals. I wanna move on."
Right.
And so like goals have been accomplished. Like one client in particular, she wanted to switch to a more like intuitive eating practice of just
Mhm.
listening to her body, or maybe summers get too busy to track. And so we want to focus on like, how can I still sustain maintenance or the surplus or the cut without
Mhm.
necessarily dialing in numbers? Sometimes we need a break, right?
Yep.
If we're not doing it consistently, sometimes we just need to back off and really assess like, is this the best way for you? We don't want
Mhm.
to track forever. And or it's creating disordered eating behaviors is when we need to
Right.
stop. And so
Yeah.
that's something to be really, really hyper aware of.
Well, I think we should elaborate on those.
Yeah.
So the ones that we see is people get fixated on being perfect. They'll
Mhm.
feel a lot of shame and guilt if they don't hit their numbers perfectly, or they'll just hide what they ate altogether.
Right.
So they start creating these patterns that, and a client said this the other day, I just have the mindset if it's not in there, then I'll just deal with it later.
Right.
And we know that's not true because your body's using that energy over the next course of the next couple of days, right?
Mhm.
Or whatever. So it's still happening, right? Also, where just this fixation and obsession, which would those all of these things go together of just being so obsessed and fixated. And I even have some clients who get angry because they want to eat in a certain way, but they want to have certain goals, and they get almost pissed that what they want is like the food that they want is so high calorie. I had a client like this because the company I worked for at the time really promised eat anything you want and lose weight. And she was trying to do that, but that's not how it worked.
Right.
And she would get angry and of course this was her scapegoating the
Yeah. Yeah.
process, right? But clients will oftentimes get angry and then they'll get even more obsessed. And so that's what I see from a disordered pattern. Would you add anything to
No.
that?
No, I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think you covered.
I will say I have worked with people who have a history of an eating disorder
Mhm.
that have chose to track food. And it's that same mentality of not everyone should. And not everyone, yeah, definitely not. It has worked because it gives them a sense of control while doing the thing that they're scared of,
Right.
which is eating more. And if I can get someone to eat more consistently with tracking food and make small tweaks, like with my one client, we don't actually have a macro goal. I just look at her food and we make small tweaks in what she's eating. So I don't actually set a goal.
Mhm.
I'm looking at how much she's eating and I say, okay, this week we're going to focus on adding a tablespoon of oil.
Mhm.
And we make these small little changes. And it's worked brilliantly for the people who have used it. If I ever see red flags or pink flags, then we pull it out. But
Mhm.
I had one client that eventually she plateaued in her healing process. So we had to she stopped working with me because she kind of hit this like 1900 calorie range, which for her, unfortunately, was still in a slight deficit. Um, so that's when I then referred out.
Yeah.
But she ate 18 to 1900 calories
That's
for
pretty
a
good.
good amount of time for
Yeah.
someone who suffered from a pretty serious eating disorder. So
Well,
I
and to get
call
the
it a win.
average woman who is not eating 18 to 19, who's maybe in the 12 to 15 to
Ugh,
18,
yeah.
19 is pretty
Yeah,
remarkable itself too.
absolutely. So yeah, so those are reasons why you would stop. But I think it's important because people just like when they hit a goal weight, they just say, okay, I'm there, I'm
Right.
done.
Right.
They stop tracking. One thing we didn't add in here that I think is really important is we're talking about like not doing this cold turkey, but also you should probably have reversed out before
Stopping.
deciding to intuitively
Mhm.
eat and stop tracking. I think that's important to
Yeah.
note because we want to know what it's like to reverse diet in our program. We want to teach the client everything. Like I have my client Serena is graduating this week, and I need to put her in the group. I forgot about that. And she has at this point gone in a deficit and reversed to maintenance and is in maintenance and loosely tracking and maintaining her weight.
Mm-hmm.
And, for her, I taught her how to reverse, how to go into a deficit. So we're, the past couple of weeks, we're having a conversation. She's like, okay, so what if this happens? So I'm just like helping her. So what if my activity goes higher? So I actually made her a chart that said, like, this is what activity levels where your weight is currently, what they look like. And we always have the conversation. This is just also a guesstimate. So you can push this up some. And if we start seeing weight gain, we can just bring it back. And these are just messages we're teaching her over and over. So now she feels great. She's going to kind of fly into the sunset on her own because she knows what to do now. But I think before we talk about moving out of it, we should have at least reverse to maintenance.
Yes. Well, and even there's a benefit of going through each phase too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of maintenance, reverse, cut, surplus. So you can actually see like what the quantity looks like and the numbers come out too.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about like going cold turkey, it's like some clients where I'm like, nope, we're done. Like we're switching gears here. But for generally, I don't recommend most people just go cold turkey. Because they'll end up kind of doing like your client could easily say, okay, I met my goal. Like I'm just going to go back to how I want to eat and do all the things, which is again part of the difference of our program that we offer is how the old you doesn't do that anymore. We don't do the diet to get to the goal and then say, fuck this. Like I'm going to go back to the way I eat because now I reached the goal. Right. So that's one thing to consider, like with us talking versus maybe other coaches or programs, is that their structure is to say, get to this goal. Then once you're there, you're good to go. Whereas ours is you're talking about with Serena is an educational piece for long-term independence that she can always go back and reference that paper. She can always come back and kind of have set up a call with us to be like, here's what's happening. It's been a couple of years. I just want to check in. Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
So it's the cold turkey is a loose term depending on the client, but in general, we don't say, okay, you reached it. Let's just be done. Because at that point, like we talked about, if you're hitting the numbers consistently, like if I'm always focused on the numbers, but not focused on what it looks like on my plate, you're not bringing awareness to what it looks like when you're going to serve it yourself. Right. Yes. So a 5-ounce chicken breast looks a lot different than you think it does. Even I'll say like 200 grams of rice, like cooked white rice looks a lot different than you think it does. And it's probably less than what you eyeball it. So if we're going cold turkey and we haven't learned how to translate the scale into actual, I guess, like outcomes or like physical content.
Or like memory.
Yeah. Then we're missing a big piece that's going to keep either the weight off or the gains there, right? Or even not even maybe the gains or the weight off, but even the sustainability of long-term health, right? Because it's really easy to slip back in one way or the other. There's also when we go cold turkey and we're just eating to the numbers, usually there's a lack of association between how you feel and the food that you eat. So for example, if you're consistently tracking like maybe an apple, but every time you have an apple, like something simple, my mouth gets itchy, but I'm not really sure. And I start tracking that. Well, now I can see like, oh, on Monday I had an apple and my mouth got itchy. Well, last week I had an apple on Thursday and my mouth got itchy. Maybe it's something like that. Whereas if you don't have, whereas if you don't have that data, you're just kind of like, I don't know, my mouth just gets itchy every couple days. Like,
right. No, and that's again that educational piece.
Yes.
It's even just having a menu of what you've had to eat.
Yes.
And if you have bloating, digestion, digestive issues, constipation, pain in your stomach, or like my husband, he couldn't understand why his nose was running all the time. And he'd wake up every morning and blow his nose. He'd get out of the shower, blow his nose. Motherfucker was allergic to eggs. And it wasn't the allergy of like, I'm, needing an EpiPen, but but he would, if he didn't have that menu of what he had eaten, and then had been like, oh, that's interesting. Every time I have eggs, and he was having eggs every day. So it's so helpful. And I do think every single person that is not where it's not going to create those disordered behaviors would benefit from it
Yes.
so much. Again, it's like taking a class on finances,
Mhm.
understanding how to balance your checkbook. Like
Mhm.
these are things, it's your body, you know? So, um, understanding the way you feel, understanding what the portions look like,
Mhm.
right? And again, this idea of the false confidence of how much have I been aware? How much awareness have I given to this process?
I interrupt this episode to bring you our August promo, which is $1 for 1 month of the Mindset and Movement Fitness Training app. This app has been designed for anyone, whether you're a beginner, advanced, whether you have access to a full gym, or maybe you have dumbbells at home, or maybe you only have 20 minutes and you want to get a great workout in. If this is you, this app has been designed for you. The app includes 4-phase training programs. We have a 5-day split for someone who has access to a full gym. We have a 5-day split if someone has access to dumbbells. We have a 3-day body weight and band split if you want to start there. We have a 3-day time crunch dumbbell workout split if you're short on time. And we have core programs that you can add to any of the other programs. The nice thing about this app is that every month the workout change. The workouts are going to be designed based on the previous workout, so they're well phased so that you get the results that you desire. You also get access to our community forum of like-minded individuals to share your experience and share your workouts and your success. You'll also get access to a variety of resources that the Mindset of Matter includes in this program. So if you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, click the link below to get $1 for 1 month. And here's the great thing. After the first month, it's $29 per month. So you'll definitely want to partake in this. Now, back to the show.
Because like you said, if I'm just tracking to the numbers, I am missing the awareness piece.
Right.
You're like an angel. There you go.
I know. There we go.
And so we think that we are creating confidence in tracking, but we're missing the steps, right? We're going through the motions, but we're missing the important steps that will create a true confidence in tracking. Like, again, paying attention to the portion sizes, paying attention to how we feel. So then we get really frustrated because we've been tracking for 2 years, but we haven't been paying attention to those things.
Right.
Then we maybe stop tracking and then we see the scale go up, or, you know, our pants are tighter, or we will do progress photos still and we're seeing a gain in fat, or our DEXA scan is different. And then you're like, what the fuck? Why can't I do this? Now tracking is even more daunting to you because you didn't take the necessary steps. And it's just like we talk about with weight loss. Like, we don't look at the outcome, look at the process.
Right.
And if you want to have sustainable weight loss, you have to look at the steps you take. It's the same with tracking. You have to look at, you know, these particular things if we're going to create a true confidence around them.
Right. And I want to highlight something that you touched on a little bit, but I want to elaborate on is this sense of false confidence. So for example, I've got it. I'm just going to stop tracking without having like these backstories that we're kind of talking about, as well as like feeling overwhelmed by the tracking. My question to that client is going to be, have you been in this place before? Because more likely than not, I feel great about tracking, and now yet you're my client wanting for weight loss. We've probably been here before. Or the fuck it, like, I don't want to, I'm so exhausted by doing this. We've probably been here before. So there's a lot deeper. It's not necessarily, again, the tracking, that's just a symptom of this feeling or the story that we're telling ourselves. And then this repeat behavior that we're doing as well. And so that's something that I like to point out with tracking too, is like, okay, what's your relationship with it? Yes, we can determine that. But also, what does it actually mean to you? What's the story we're telling ourselves when we stop and start? Because once we can kind of work through that and say, you know, I stop and start because I saw my mom always doing it. So I thought that was the way to go. And then I had this coach who prescribed a meal plan for me. And so then I just like created a bad relationship. Well, the tracking is just a symptom of like all these diet plans that you were doing throughout your life and just a representation of that. So is that when I track, I like feel like I'm on a diet instead of educating myself and seeing how much I eat, what do I eat, what do those nutrients consist of as well. So I did want to touch on that.
No, that's a good point, because I hear women all the time, I've tried every single diet. I've tried everything. I couldn't lose weight. And I'm like, well, how did you track your food?
Right.
And they don't. They, you know, ate keto. So they just stopped eating carbs and ate a bunch of fat, but they put themselves in a calorie surplus. You know what I mean? Like, it's so then of course, like you're saying, it's that story we're telling ourselves about not just on and off tracking, but tracking in general. If you see it as this daunting thing, there's a lot of shortcuts that you can take, and we teach them
Yes.
in our onboarding.
Yes.
And then on my first call with clients, I go over them again. Like, you've got to save a meal. You have copy from date, copy to date. We teach them how to create recipes. They can send something to us and be like, this is how you would track this. Really teaching them these shortcuts. And, the misconception of meals have to be different every single day. No, they don't. You can have like 3 to 5 meals. You kind of just
rotate them.
Yep. So I think that's when we're talking about leading up to tracking, like get those meals that you enjoy. And like for Mark and I, we'll add a new meal maybe once a quarter.
Right.
Like we've got our meals on lock.
Yeah.
Well,
and let me add to that too, though, because like you create your meals in the app. That doesn't mean your meal has to be specifically that every time you create it, right? Like, for example, there's like this Moroccan stew that we like to make, and it's got a ton of different ingredients. But if I follow the recipe, it's relatively the same like amount of ingredients. But for example, there may be 210 grams of potatoes that I'm eating at that time, whereas last time I made it, I'm having 205. To me, that's not the nitpicky you need to worry about, because you're consistently having this meal over time. Now, if I'm having a cheeseburger with just one patty, and then all of a sudden I'm having cheeseburger with 2 patties I make, that's different. But like when we're adding all these ingredients together, like once you make that meal in there, just repeat the same thing. If maybe you're starting to have 3 eggs instead of 2 eggs with the meal, okay, just add in the extra egg instead of like recreating the wheel with it. Or if it's been a couple of years and you're like, man, I haven't really updated this, then do it. But after a while, kind of move on, right? Stop making it like, I think that's what we're talking about too, is sometimes it can be a complicated process, but sometimes I feel like clients are overcomplicating it and making the tracking have more power or more say than it really does, instead of just using it as a data tool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, just coming back to like, what should I like this kind of idea of this checklist of, okay, have I done this? So again, we are finding the meals that we can kind of just rotate through: breakfast, lunch, and dinner snacks. We are looking at the portion size and saying, this is 3 ounces. This is 4 ounces, while they're on the scale. We are listening to our body and how it feels after certain foods. We're reverse dieting, maybe even going into a surplus. Those are really, really important pieces of this. One thing I wanted to add, and I just lost my train of thought.
So another thing, so we're talking essentially about recommended things to have 85% down prior to backing off the tracking.
Yeah.
Another way would be like slow down and eat the food and focus on the fullness levels for each meal. So for example, is an 800 calorie meal pretty filling for you? Okay. Well, what does that look like on your plate? What does it look like if I'm having a 600 calorie meal of the same thing, right? Because it could be the same meal, just less calories. What does that look like on my plate? How does it make me feel? And starting to create that connection again, rather than just eating to the calorie number or eating to the macro number.
Yeah. And just, for me, it's also being real with yourself. Like I look at some people's tracking when they go to eat at a restaurant, and I'm like, did you really think that was 210 calories?
Right. Did you really think the Brussels sprouts with bacon and balsamic was only 100 calories?
Like, no,
absolutely.
No. Yeah. It was probably like 600 calories.
Yeah.
That's a big thing is when you're intuitively eating. And now when we're talking about intuitive eating, we're not talking about like the 9-step process. We're just talking about like intuitively listening to your body and then eating, right? You have to just be aware of those hidden calories in things, because you can get very far away from that. Even when you're eating what people call healthy foods.
Oh yeah.
They can be really, really high calories. So that's another one I see with clients that I'm like, I don't think you're ready yet. You continue to track these meals out like they're 500 calories and below, unless you're going to seasons 52. That's not going to happen for you.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also being aware of alcohol intake, because I think there is an honesty factor when clients are truly putting in their alcohol amount of realizing like, oh shit, like I just had like 500 calories worth of wine and maybe I don't want that. But over time, if we're not perpetually checking in and assessing, like, am I having more wine over time? Like, is that what could be, like, that's an easy thing. Again, if you want to drink, drink. Like, we are not the girls to tell you like, okay, you got to stop. But we also need to recognize like, it does have calories. You don't burn them off. Like if we're perpetually having 500 extra calories of wine or alcohol per week, each day, or maybe over time, like that can lead to weight gain. And that's an easy one to assess. Am I drinking more? Is it because maybe it's summer and we're going out on the lake more often? Or maybe I'm stressed and I'm turning towards alcohol at the end of the night. Or maybe I'm having more social engagements because it's like my birthday month. Like those things are fine, but also recognize there's a trade-off there too. If I'm not getting the information feedback consistently, then I need to be aware of these practices too.
Yeah. Well, and alcohol too, the unfortunate thing, because there's no nutrients in them, it tends to just increase like the fat in your midsection as well. So like I'll see clients who are thin, except for in their midsections, and they're the ones having the wine or whatever multiple times a night or a week. I'm sorry, multiple times during the week. And, you know, again, y'all know I drink and I have a good time, but I do have I have limits on it.
Right.
Well,
and you plan ahead.
Oh, 1,000. And I track high when I drink. I know how much a Coors Light is, but I will still track like way too many calories just so that I give myself that buffer. And then lastly, like another thing to check off is like just knowing your mental habits or your relationship with food. And speaking of drinking, I have a client who's been with me for a while and she's had some stress come up, and she's not been sleeping well. She was the one I was talking about who she had to go into a different time zone and then work in the morning. Did I talk to you guys about this? So she, without giving away what she does, like she had to work this like 1 a.m. to like noon project in a different time zone. So she went from the East Coast to, I believe, like San Antonio. So like Central Standard Time.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, we were talking about how this affected her body, but then I would see these drinks in her log. And I'm like, hey, you know, I know that you're stressed, and ultimately when you're stressed, you used to turn to alcohol, and we're seeing that happen. But also, like, how is this affecting your physical self? Like, we're already going through all this shit, and then we're adding these drinks. We had this conversation this week, you know, and that's kind of one of her patterns of when she's stressed out is she'll go to the alcohol. Other patterns are kind of that fuck it mentality. I had another client, you know, kind of confess, if you will, that she was eating a certain type of food, and she's like, well, fuck it, I'll just eat the rest just to get him out of the house. Like, these are things you need to know. I know one of mine is sometimes I'll just start eating something crunchy because I'm, you know, stressed out. This usually happens around what would be my cycle, and I'll be aware I'm doing it and then still do it. And now I'm just like, okay, if I'm going to have this food around this time of the month, I'm putting it. So what I'll do is I'll put it in, because we have those jars that we keep like the crunchy things in. For those, they're just like those fresh plastic jars. So we don't just have them in bags everywhere. I watched the, what was it called? Home Edit during COVID, and organized my pantry and everything. And then Mark made a mess of it recently, so I had to reorganize it. Anywho, but I will take the lid of that and then put whatever the crunchy is in the lid, because I know. And it's funny because when I eat out of the little, whether I put them in little snack packs or whatever, I don't eat over. You know what I mean? But
well, I would say, like, think of the bag of chips, like the big bag of chips versus the small bag of chips, right? Like, it's easier to keep eating the big bag of chips because it's endless. Same with the
Yes.
peanuts. Like it's but if I put them if I buy the small like portion size bag of chips, you're probably done because
Yes.
to be like, I'm gonna get a second bag of chips, like I probably don't need to. There at least is a barrier to that.
Yes. Yeah. So know your food relationship, your food rules, if you will. Even thinking about what was that?
Tendencies and habits.
Yeah. Well, even thinking about this kind of, oh, well, I worked out today or I'm going to work this off tomorrow. Like that is not conducive to intuitive eating.
No,
That
not at all.
is disordered eating. So those are some ways to kind of improve your practices before we stop tracking. So let's talk about backing off.
Yes.
My
So
first,
go ahead.
go ahead.
So I was going
My
to say
first
it. Here, you go, and I'm not going to say anything. Go.
okay. My first is reverse tracking.
Reverse
So
tracking.
yeah. So reverse tracking is I'm making something and I look at whatever, say it's the chicken breast, and I will tell myself in my head. Sometimes I'll even have them write it down and then they'll share it with me what they think it is going to be.
Yep.
Right. So I call it reverse tracking. And we may start that for one day and then, or one meal and then add to it. Usually they start with breakfast because their breakfast is normally the same every day.
Right.
So it's an easy way to get into reverse tracking, but that's how I start. Go ahead.
No, mine is same. Mine is like, look at either what you're cutting up or making or preparing and think like, okay, I think this is 120 grams of chicken breast, then weigh it. And then you can go, okay, no, it's actually 140. So what does 120 look like? And then keep going. Okay. So that's 120. Got it. Boom. Next thing. And you can do this all throughout the day. You can also, again, if it's too much, you don't have to do everything at once. You can always start with just breakfast. You can always start with just dinner. I would agree with you. Probably breakfast is a better way to start because if you're thinking of lunch, we're trying to just get in because of working. Dinner, we're so fatigued. We're trying to take care of everything and we're coming home. So where breakfast, I have the most mental energy available. And it's usually, again, like you said, the same. So what is, like if I'm going to crack some eggs, what do 3 eggs actually come out to? Okay, about 160 grams. Okay, that's good to know. So like this is what we can do. What is actually like if I'm going to add egg whites, what does half a cup of egg whites actually measure out to and what does it look like? And so just again, bringing that awareness and guessing beforehand of like half a cup is probably, I don't even know, an ounce. So you put it in. Great. Okay, so it's about ounce 125. Like that's actually not that far off. That'll work.
Right. One thing I do too of awareness is like if I'm grabbing like a cheese,
Ooh,
I will literally pay attention to how it feels in my fingers when I'm at like the 28 grams. Yeah. Like the weight of it for sure. So that's another thing. Like I can literally grab grated cheese and be like, this is 20 grams and it will be on. Or like the scoop. If I'm taking a scoop out of like PB Fit, I will know exactly, like just looking at the scoop and like how heavy it is, like exactly how much that is. It's pretty remarkable at this point. Why I still track. The other thing too is again considering how full you are, and I want to give you a couple of steps on how to do this. So first things first, cut your meal like physically, like not physically, mentally in half. You can actually put a line down the middle. Take a 2-minute timeout in the middle of eating just to check in with your fullness cues and look at the rest of your plate and decide, okay, I'm say at 50%, maybe you're 60% full eating half of your plate, right? Just because it's half your plate doesn't mean it's automatically going to be 50%. You may be 70% full at half of your plate. Last night, I didn't finish my dinner. A dinner I normally have, I was like, I'm fucking full. I ended up eating it for lunch today. And so you take that 2-minute timeout, check in where you're at, look at the rest of your plate and decide, okay, how many more bites is going to get me to one of the following? So in a cut, we're eating to 70, 80% fullness. The way I like to explain this, as you've heard me say it here before, you can get up and do 10 jumping jacks. You can eat more, but we're trying to eat in this deficit range. So I should be able to get up and do 10 jumping jacks and not feel gross or like I'm going to vomit, right? Okay. So if I look at my plate and I know, like I'm listening to my body and I'm trying to think, okay, how many more bites? Because 3 bites versus 5 bites versus 7 bites can take you between a deficit, maintenance, and surplus. Like that's how it works. So how many bites do I need to get to my 10 jumping jacks? Not less, not more. And that's going to take time, right? Then you have maintenance, which is around 80 to 90% fullness. That means I can get up and walk around, but doing the 10 jumping jacks will be uncomfortable for me. Okay. Surplus is going to be your 90% plus, and that is going to be, I need to kind of sit here and I am uncomfortably full. I felt this way after we went out for our anniversary dinner, which I talked about. I had a dress on and I like literally put my purse in front of my belly. I was so uncomfortably full, but it's one of those meals that I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's the place we go to for that reason. But that 2-minute timeout is going to help slow you down, give your body and brain a chance to have a convo. And ultimately you'll be able to be like, okay. And while you're doing that, I would suggest, again, if this isn't something that is mentally too much for you, weighing yourself on a daily basis and taking the weekly average, doing measurements, doing progress photos, having something that a form of data that says I'm on the right track. Or as I told my client recently, I said, hey, when we're seeing your weight go up and you're eating more intuitively, that definitely is just showing your blind spots. So.
Well, and as you said too, is creating that internal dialogue with yourself. You don't have to like be speaking out loud of like, okay, I'm eating halfway through and now I'm going to wait in 2 minutes, but just checking in like, okay, how do I feel? What is my goal? My goal is I'm in a maintenance phase. Like I just want to maintain my weight. I'm really happy with my results. And you're going to learn over time too. You're going to eat a little bit too much and you're going to eat a little bit too less. As you're working and practicing on this. That's totally okay. The trick is to not say like, fuck, I ate like too, like you could say when you guys went on your anniversary dinner, like, fuck, I ate too much. Like, oh no, like that's the trick is to not spiral. And again, going back to one of our other comments is before you do this, you need to work on your mindset and be aware of the tendencies that you have and the conversations that you have with yourself. Because in all honesty, if you overeat if you go to 90% plus for one of the meals as you're trying to do this, that is a great learning opportunity for you to be like, oh, okay, that's a 90. Like now where would I have adjusted? So that way next time I do this, I'm more aware of that. Like maybe I need to like intentionally, and this is going to sound terrible, but intentionally undereat. So that way I can see what it feels like to be hungry. And then maybe I have a little bit later, like a 30 minutes later, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of do want to finish my dinner off a little bit more because you can always prolong it. Like, just because even when you're going out to eat or having food at home, you don't have to eat it all in one sitting. Like you may be having, right?
You say that. Yeah.
Like you may be like having it, like if we're out to dinner, like you can decide, I am about 70% full, 80%. I'm going to take the rest home and see how I feel when I get home. But even at dinner at home, like, okay, I can put my plate aside. Maybe I'll get up, do some dishes. And then if I realize, oh, I'm still hungry, I can go back to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the end of the world.
It's funny you say that. So yesterday I love this particular burrito and it's a 1,200 calorie burrito by itself, not counting the hash browns. Scramble. It's the Schneider's. Is it Schneider's? The meat company out here? Chorizo. They have these bacon cheese hash browns.
Oh, hell yeah.
Just that. It's so good. It's so good. And it's something we can eat together because he can eat eggs. So we have it sometimes. We probably have it once a month, if that. And normally I just eat half of it and save it. But I was hungry yesterday morning because the night that we went out, all I had was half of the buffalo chicken flatbread that we had because I wasn't hungry during the day. So I didn't eat very much the day before. So my body was just kind of like, hey, you're still hungry. And I wanted to get the burrito. And I ate half of it and I put it to the side and we watched the show we were watching. And then I'd pick it up 20 minutes later, eat a couple pieces or eat a couple bites. I eventually, like over like a 2-3 hour period, I finished it. But I just kind of like just waited and my body processed it. And the funny thing is I wasn't very hungry for the rest of the day. And then I didn't end up eating all my dinner. So just very importante. The other thing too is like, don't just, like we said, go cold turkey. You can just like have a day of intuitive eating. Like I call it your intuitive day. This is your intuitive eating day. And again, for our clients, we get to hold their hand through this process. We get to look at the other forms of data and see, okay, are we seeing these patterns of increased weight? I will tell you guys, for most of my clients, it takes a couple reverse diets until they get that shit right. And maintenance. It takes a couple times before they get it right because they still have that residual noise in their head, whether it's all or nothing thinking or whatever that is. So we definitely want to take our time getting into this, which kind of talks about just like assessing, where are your blind spots? What are your fears, your anxieties? What are the things that potentially are going to be barriers to you being successful? And you don't have to have all the answers to do this, but we need to be curious about, oh, okay, I'm seeing the scale go up. What's going on here? I got to a weight that I haven't been to in a long time, end of last year, early this year. And it was simply just because I was being just loose, way too loose, and not taking my weight. So I wasn't weighing myself. Plus I wasn't necessarily tracking, and I gained like a lot. Like, I think it was like 8 pounds. No, it would have been 12 pounds at that point. So yeah.
Well, and we say like when you take one day off, I always recommend a weekday because your day tends to be more structured. And again, if you're rotating through these 5-7 meals that you consistently have, you've already been practicing your eyeball portion, your fullness levels. And so the weekday as the structure just makes it easier and less fearful. And then, so like what I'll tell clients and I've had them do is, okay, choose a day that's easiest for you. Like maybe you don't have a heavy schedule and that we can really like focus on this and spend some extra time being aware. Okay, so maybe that's Tuesday. Great. And we're just going to keep doing that until they feel like, okay, I think I've got it. Okay, maybe let's add in Thursday then. Great. I think I've got it. And so I'm going to work through the weekdays first, and maybe not all of the weekdays. Maybe I have 1 or 2 weekdays as a check-in, and then I'm going to switch to the weekends because the weekend, like, so for example, the burrito that you had, you probably don't usually have scramble throughout the day over on the weekday, right?
No.
But so that's an abnormality. And so we want to be able to not adjust ourselves to the abnormality, but be able to be flexible with them. And so bringing awareness to that. And so then essentially we add in the weekend, and then maybe it's just a 1 day a week tracking just to make sure we're doing a-okay. I've literally had a client, she was doing great. She was tracking. We got her to more Whole Foods. And then eventually she did 1 weekday, 1 weekend. And it was literally to make sure she was eating enough just because of her work schedule. She drove a lot for work. So making sure she got meals in between. And the weekend, it was like, I wake up late and then I kind of get distracted and then we don't really have stuff prepped. So then it was to say, are you eating enough on that weekend day? Right. And so that was one way that she structured it of, again, loose tracking, but checking in of, am I still hitting these goals that I'm setting for myself?
Yeah. Well, and that just brings up some of the other just kind of notes, with me, like for a lot of our clients, I'll just have them track their protein. Right. So they're just hitting a protein goal and it's all dependent on their goals. Right. So they're like, no, now this is the point I want to build. I want to get stronger. I want to look, more full of my muscle and my tone, if you will. So we'll only track one macronutrient, right? So that's also something you can do. Like I said to the other client, I said, look, if we're seeing weight gain, we can always come back. We can always come back to tracking. And I'll have clients tell me that, like I have a client, Nina, who I do just her workouts, and she's been with me for years. And sometimes she'll just check in. She'll be like, yeah, I'm just seeing the scale go up, like in a pattern, which I teach. It's not just one day. It's like a pattern. She's like, so I'm just going to come back to tracking for a little bit. And right when she does that, her weight comes back down, and she's okay. And then she'll intuitively eat. We'll talk about, she doesn't see me for the nutrition side of things, but I always just mention like, what happened here? Like, what can we learn from this? Because again, even us, people who've tracked forever, like we're still going to get things wrong.
Oh yeah.
Or life's going to get lifey and we may have a new thing come up that we don't even realize. Like the crunchy thing just became a new thing within want to say the past year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just my stress level or whatever it was, but now I just portion it out and I, plan it in. My dog kept me up all night, so I apologize for the yawning.
Well, it even like going back to, so maybe what you can do, so because at the end of the day, our clients tend to like guidelines and kind of structure and plans and timelines.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're working on not tracking, we can say, okay, we've met this in 6 weeks from now, or maybe like for Nina, for example, every 12 weeks, she has it scheduled where she does a check-in where you can structure it more, not religiously, but more structured, as opposed to like, oh, I'm noticing changes, like maybe I need to track. And that way you can gain confidence, as in like, oh, see, I've been consistent for the last 6 weeks. Nothing on the scales changed. My body composition looks similar. Measurements are similar. My tracking stays within my calorie goals that I have. Okay, I'm doing okay. Now, like in assessing and feeling that and reflecting, maybe in 8 weeks, I kick it up. And that's when I double check again. Okay, I'm doing that. Maybe I do it in 12 weeks. And you always keep pushing it until you go, okay, maybe I just need to check in like when your client is, of like, I think things are going a little screwy. So let's just make sure I'm on the right track. And you can also change what you define as tracking too. So like in the beginning, we talked about the numerous ways you can track. Well, you can say like, I'm really going to focus on my plate portions right now and making sure that I have, or even hand portion guide, right? I'm making sure that I'm tracking in that way. And then I can back that off or not be so religious with it too. So it doesn't have to be like, I either don't track or do track. It could say, okay, I'm going to track my calories. I'm going to see what my plate portion looks like when I am equating like 120 grams of chicken breast to what it looks like on the plate as far as like a pie. And then now I'm going to track that way. Okay, great. That can work for you too.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if things start, you start getting critical over your tracking or not tracking, we have to get curious and figure out what's going on, just like we talked about. So good. I love this. Good conversation. It's definitely, like I said, been a topic of conversation with our clients. And, for some clients, you're like, no, I love tracking. I can do this forever, which is great. And usually that's the one that doesn't put so much of their worth onto hitting those numbers, like, or putting it on like us looking at their numbers. Like we're like, oh, this bitch. No, that's not what we do. We don't do that at all. If you're close to perfect, that's more concerning to me than the person who's like a little low one day, a little high the other day, So good. Awesome. Well, if you guys find this information helpful, please share this podcast with your friends and family that would benefit from it. If you could like, subscribe, and rate and review, meaning write a review. Don't just click the 5 stars. Write out something nice, but only click the 5 stars. No lower than that. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find us on Instagram at fitbyamanda.az and our entire team at Mindset of Matter Coaching. You'll find this on YouTube at The Mindset of Matter. Please check out the show notes for the promos we discussed throughout this episode. And if you want to just have one thing that you keep track of forever in your mind forever, it is this one thing.
What you say in the mind,
you see in the mirror. Goodbye. Bye.